What Bangabandhu changed completely was his ability to reach out to a big working class audience, whether in the urban areas, workers, the Shorbohara of the city, or in fact even moving into the rural areas. And he did it because he had a very conscious view of politics, that if politics was very shallow and based only in the urban areas, then the capacity to in fact actually challenge it and for the military or any sort of oppressive force to in fact actually come in and to suppress it was a lot easier. It was only when you took the political process down to the masses and where instead of several thousand people coming out, you could in fact mobilize tens of thousands of people, that the quality of the political relationship would change. So this was his perspective. Bangabandhu was no less a leader of the masses, and he was a leader who identified with them not just as a matter of belief or ideology, but as a person who had really lived with them and appreciated their circumstances and felt that if you really wanted a mass support base, you then had to reach out to them and to offer them something which would give you credibility, give a leader credibility in their eyes. He traveled all over the length and breadth of Bangladesh into the heart of the rural areas. Since the party had limited resources, he would travel by bus, he would travel by third-class railway. Once he would go on rickshaws, he would go on foot. And he would sit with people in tea shops, in their village homes, everywhere. And he saw at first hand the conditions of life of the people and the exploitative nature of the society within which they functioned. And all these were for him real life problems. So people like me and some of my colleagues who wrote about these issues of social injustice and so forth, it wasn't that we had any first-hand exposure to these problems. We wrote about it from what we had observed and what we had read. But for Bangabandhu, this was a lived problem, something that he had really observed. My granduncle, Khaja Nazimuddin, who had been a former Prime Minister and Governor General, and had lived most of his time up to 1957 in Karachi. In fact, came back to, he was now long out of power, came back to re-establish his home in Dhaka. And he thought it would be a courtesy if he reached out to the Prime Minister and Bangabandhu to let them know he was here, and then to do so by inviting them to have dinner with him. Now, he, of course, was one of their main political opponents for a long time, as everyone knows, since he was heading a Muslim League government and many other areas of difference with him, with the Awami League. But such was the political culture of that time, and such was the sense of political decency of the leaders, including Bangabandhu in those days, that when he invited them to come and have dinner with him, they came very readily and treated it almost as if this was an official invitation from a visiting head of state. So they came dressed formally in their sherwanis, and they came and they greeted him very effusively, and treated him. He was older than them as a Murabbi. I was at that time living in the same, just come back from England. I was living in the same building, the same house with Khaja Nazimuddin and his son. And so I also came along to the dinner, and I met him there for the first time. Ayub Khan had made a big speech on the great economic achievements of his regime. Bangabandhu then sent for me and said that I want to challenge this. So I want you to prepare a speech challenging all these sort of economic claims, which again I did. So in this way, we had encounters with him. But then, of course, once the 6-point program itself, 4 of the points were based on economic issues. And of course, they drew heavily in the preparation of these on the writings of a whole group of economists, myself, Nurul Islam, Prof Rehman, Professor Sadif, Akhlaqul Rehman, all those people had all been writing about issues relating to economic disparity and the whole concept of 2 economies in one country. And these found their way into the 6-point program. So in that sense, the economists were always in touch with them, and we were very visible people because we had done most of the public talking and debating at the martial law period when politicians were not allowed to speak. So this was the phase where I was then seeing him emerge as a political leader after 1964-65, when the Awami League and Bangabandhu emerged as a national leader. Of course, when he presented his 6 points, he then not only became a major political figure, but a political figure with a political agenda of great resonance with the people of East Pakistan at that time. He was perhaps the first leader to fully recognize that there was no future in national politics, that everyone at the end of the day, whether from East or West, aspired to become a national leader. He thought that the future lay in consolidating his base domestically and to build it around an agenda for complete political and economic autonomy for the then East Pakistan. And that this was going to be the focal point in his politics. And I think this led to a split with the major leaders who opposed this. And because they were senior figures, they would not go along with him. So he went away and he reactivated the party. They all stayed on as members of the National Democratic Alliance, which was in a way their foolishness because they disconnected from their own main base. And Bangabandhu fully captured it. He was very decisive in his decision making. That was a very important factor. He listened to you if you had things to say. He had a very alert political mind. He was willing to learn all the time, argue with you. In fact, if he took decisions which we disagreed with, we would argue back with him and try to persuade him to change his mind. And he was always persuadable. I think what was important about him as a great leader was that he was always willing to learn. He had views, but he didn't expect you to then sort of just accept whatever he said and simply never to question this. And if we thought that particular positions which he had taken, we disagreed with this and we pointed out problems, he would then be quite willing to reverse it. And correspondingly, if he took a decision and we challenged it, he would not just tell us to mind our business or get angry with us for even daring to challenge this. He would explain to us as to what were the circumstances which compelled him to take a particular set of decisions. I think what was very significant was the complete change in the direction of policy, which took place after the murder and after the change of regime. Of course, the initial change of regime associated with the Hunkar Mushtaq period was very short-lived. The substantial change came when Zia Rahman took over as the Deputy Chief Martial Law Administration, the de facto ruler of Bangladesh. And then he continued in till his assassination in 81. And then after that, Ayub continued, and then his party again was re-elected. So what was significant during the period of what I like to call as cantonment rule, because both the two leaders, in fact, had their sources of power in the cantonment, was the complete change in direction. I mean, you saw the secular element of his Bangabandhu's policies had already been institutionally diluted through amendments to the constitution, but it wasn't just purely sort of, you may say, purely notional change of vocabulary. It was also that qualitatively you became much more communalized in the political direction. The other major change in direction of policy came about in the elimination of socialism from the constitution. Now, socialism can mean many things to many people. To Bangabandhu, it meant the creation of a more egalitarian society. As he said, he wanted an exploitation-free society where the rights of workers and farmers would then be sort of respected, and they would, their conditions of life would be made into the priority of his economic policy agendas. His view was that the government should not become an instrument for perpetuating inequalities, and you should try to, in fact, build a more egalitarian society in terms of ownership rights and in terms of benefits from the development process. So these were all very consciously reversed in the subsequent regimes which came into place. And these I identify as the actual departure then from the fundamentals of nationhood. So that killing him, you then also change the whole direction of policy. And of course, that change which was put in place from virtually 16th August 1975 has never really gone away, because that has emerged as a fundamental transformation in the direction of our economic agenda. And over the years, successive regimes have carried it out where society has become much more unequal, income is much more unequally distributed. You now have a business elite which now controls the political process. Over 80% of people in parliament now claim to be in business and, in fact, use politics as a means of business advancement. So these are all complete departures from Bangabandhu's policy vision as existed, and that's why this element of it, in fact, his killing had a more sort of permanent impact than we had all anticipated. Obviously, he gave us a sense of, I mean, we were a nation, but what he did was that he then provided a political leadership to develop a sense of nationhood in us, to make us conscious of our national identity. And he fought his politics built around the concept of a nation with its clearly Bengali identity. And this is what he will always be remembered for. The great majority of the people, I think, have recognized that he was a very crucial factor in the emergence of the Bengali nation, and he was its political entrepreneur. And eventually he brought it into fruition through the political mobilization he carried out between 1969 and 71, which created the basis around which people would come together to fight the liberation war.